for letting me practice in front of you tonight. Ian and I did Toastmasters together. And wow, it's been, like just today, I saw a picture of him on Facebook in front of a large crowd being able to speak, and he's able to speak in confidence. So I don't know if you guys know what Toastmasters is, but it trains you on how to speak to people and leadership skills. And in Toastmasters, when you say, we have people in the audience with clickers. And when you do wrong things, they write it down, and it's a tough crowd. So if you guys want to do that's fine.
Not next week.
1 Peter 3:15 says, always be ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give you an account for the hope that is in you. In another place, I think it's in 1 Hesitations, it says something about giving reason in season and in flu season. And this is flu season, and I'm going to make it through this. So yeah, 1 Hesitations, if you know where that is. I was born November 14th, 1968, in a brutal snowstorm in Hood River, Oregon that gave us feet of snow. And my mother got separated from my father in the snowstorm. He went to work, and she was trapped at home, and the heat went out, and the power went out. She had to put me in her coat to keep me warm and alive and everything. It was brutal that winter. I was the fourth generation to carry the Rush name on Rush Road in Hood River, and I was the first grandchild, and my great-grandparents lived on the left of one side of the family, and other great-grandparents on the right, and my Grandpa Don and Marge lived in front of me, and I was a very treasured child, we'll say, for lack of better words. So I had a bright future. My father, was being the only son, was going to be given the family business. It's just going to be handed over to him eventually. It was GNR Trucking, did all the log trucking for Hannell Mill and Hood River. That was a big deal in the 70s and the 60s. The farm, everything, it was all going to be handed down to him and then to me. And so, future looked bright. I was a love child. My parents were 17 and 18 years old. My father as a 17-year-old, didn't graduate from high school. But still, things, that happens. That's okay. What do they say? There's no mistakes in pregnancies. There's unintentional parents, but there's no mistakes as human beings as child. And I was a love child. So things were rocky right off the bat. You know how it's said that people with issues a lot of times find each other? My dad had issues. We found out later in life he was bipolar, and he had issues. My mother grew up in orphanages and in foster care and bounced around, and came from a very dysfunctional family, and dysfunctional people oftentimes find each other. And it got rocky. It got real rocky. My father, as people that are bipolar do, could explode, and he drank a lot at times, and he got violent. And my mother had quite a few beatings. I remember as a child, not knowing what to do. And so I just wanted to please my parents. They'd be fighting and people hitting the walls and crashing and all the things you see in scary movies. And I'd be nervous, and I'd go and arrange all my books in order, biggest to smallest. And then I'd make my bed and all my Tonka trucks, biggest to smallest. And I actually still do that for a living. I arrange things. I have an auto parts store. So it got real bad. But then something happened. My father, I forget what conviction it was, but the court ordered him to take a medicine called Antabuse. And he had to go in front of a judge or somebody every day and take this pill that if he were to drink alcohol would make him violently ill. And he decided then that, I'll back up. My mother found the Lord first. And I just texted her today to find out when. And it was in 1974, Billy Graham crusade on television at Easter time in 1974. And she right then knew that was what she was looking for and what she'd been missing. She's like, why didn't anybody tell me? This is it. My wife had some of the same kind of experience when she was younger. But she knew that was it. That was going to straighten things out. And she immediately started praying for me and my father. And it worked for my father. He got in big trouble with the law and had to take this antabuse for 1 solid year. He couldn't drink alcohol. And he became a family man, and we went to church as a family. And I wanted in on this too. I saw the difference. I saw the life-changing difference. The prayers of my mother were felt. And some of you might have a little Bible like this too. And Dear Donnie, and it goes on about how she's been praying for me, and this is the most important thing. God loves you, and you belong to him now. Love in Christ, your mother. I won't read the whole thing, but that happened on June 19th, 1975. A little guy, of course I want to meet Jesus someday, and I want all these promises. So it was a true conversion. But after that year of being on an antabuse, things got ugly again, and they got real ugly. My mother suffered some severe injuries. He tried to kill her. He threw her off an embankment, and she broke some bones, and it got really ugly. And for the safety of herself and us children, we had to flee. When I say flee, it was get in the car and escape. And things, you know how it goes. There's cycles and apologies. And so my mother thought, we'll try one more time. And so we came back, and it was obvious it wasn't gonna work out. And I remember to this day, I could take you to the square inches on I grew up in those early years in my great-grandparents' house after they passed. And I could take you to that homestead farmhouse right now and show you right where I stood and shook my father's hand. He said, Donnie, you're in charge now. I might never see you again. So he wanted to be done with his family. He wanted to be on his Harley, seeing the United States and grow his hair out and run with the wild guys. And that's what he did. So my mom was, a young mother with 3 kids now and issues and no education and no job, and we landed on welfare. And, we had the food stamps, the welfare. We were living in the whole family in a spare bedroom of her mother's house, who she didn't have the best relationship with. And it was ugly, and it was in a bad neighborhood, and I was tall for my age then, and mature for my age. And of course, who did I hook up with? Not the 2nd graders, I was running with the 5th graders. And I was, we were collecting pop bottles to go down to the gas station, because in those days, anybody could buy cigarettes out of a gas, so 2nd grade, I was smoking, I was stealing packs of cigarettes off my grandfather's dash pad of his truck, Camel non-filters, 2nd grader. And it was all about running with the hoodlums and vandalism and theft and doing whatever felt good. My mom didn't have time to track me down. She tried. She cared, but she just couldn't do it all. But she got what was called a Pell Grant, and she went to Umpqua Community College and was able to become a draftsman. And soon she landed a job as a CAD operator, computer-aided drafting, in Portland, Oregon. And things were gaining momentum. But again, we couldn't afford the best neighborhoods, so there I was in inner North Portland and Northeast Portland and running with the bad kids. It's shoplifting and vandalism and lighting dumpsters on fire and anything that felt good. And I remember those times. When I'd get busted or almost get busted, just running out of a Safeway parking lot, hiding in bushes. And I was a Christian. I had the Lord, and I would pray. I'd get on my knees behind those bushes, just shaking. That's it, Lord. I'm done. I'm going to change. I hate this. Just get me out of it this time. And he would. I guess I was a fast runner. I don't know. I don't know if it was really the Lord keeping me out of trouble. It would have been better if I did get in trouble more often, I think. But there was a path, a progression. Then we landed in Gresham, Oregon. Again, we moved a lot. My mom she was a little bit of a deal maker, so am I. And she wanted to keep us out of the bad neighborhoods and the worst apartments, so she would hook up with these realtors in a down real estate economy and say, hey, look, we'll get the blackberries mowed down, we'll get the garbage out of here, we'll make this place livable if you'll give it to us for the price of a low-income apartment, and then we'll let you put the for sale sign up there, and the minute it sells, we're on to the next. So we moved a lot, went to a lot of different schools, and I was a poor kid, and I didn't dress right, and I wanted to fit in. And who do you fit in with when you're the poor kid with a low self-esteem? Again, ending up with those bad kids. But my mother had a true relationship with the Lord, and she tried every time the church doors were open to get me to church. She just figured there's going to be some good influences there. I was going to meet some friends, and she always wanted us kids to have mentors. And I don't know if you know the story of a mentor, but way back Greek mythology times, there was a general that needed to go off and fight the Trojan Wars for years, and he had a son, a beloved son, and he knew he wasn't going to be there for that son, and he needed somebody in his place. And his name, it was a trusted friend. I think legend has it was a stepbrother, but his name was Mentor. And that's where that comes from. My mom sought those mentors out. She did it through YMCA, Big Brother, Big Sister program. She shoulder tapped, meaning neighbors, people in the church. Hey, you're going fishing. Could you take my sons? They'd really like to learn. They could use some time in the woods with a man. And these guys, they weren't perfect. They swore, some of them. They weren't perfect Christians. But even though I didn't have a mentor relationship like we hear from days of old for several years, I got pieces from these men. And it's funny, all these years back, I can piece together phrases, words, experiences. I remember I was into building Frankenstein go-karts and motorcycles when I was in junior high. And I just couldn't get this old Briggs & Stratton running. And the guy next door was kind of mechanically minded, and him and I worked on it for hours. A few days, this one week, he was Donnie, or Don. I was Donald, but no, it's Don. I changed my name 3 times. Donnie, Donald, Don, as I grew up. So by then it's Don. He says, Don, you know as much about these as I do now. It stuck with me. Wow, this adult man that I look up to is saying, I'm on par with him. So those words of encouragement, maybe you think, I wish I had the time to be a mentor to that so-and-so kid. It could be just as much as having your garage door open and sharpening the blades on your lawnmower and seeing the neighborhood kid bouncing around. Hey, you want to learn something? You never know what's going to stick. So I'd encourage you. There's kids like me, on every block, in every neighborhood, everywhere you look. And they don't have to be full-on disasters like I was headed to be. They're just kids. They need you. James 1:27 says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faithless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. That's true Christianity. High school was a good time for me, I felt. So junior high in Gresham, I'd actually moved a couple times, but I was in the same school district for 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. That's a big deal. It never happened before. I had friends. I was on the track team. A couple of the pot-smoking guys thought I was cool. I had arrived. And unfortunately, and to this day, I look back on those days, there's that pecking order in school that you're the pounded on guy. And you would think that the pounded on guy, when he has a chance to be the cool guy, wouldn't do that. No, I was the guy doing the pounding now. And I'd look, if I could only go back to school and redo some of those years and those decisions, but we can't. Anyway, went 2 years at the junior high there, and then I went to Gresham High School. I was a Gresham Gopher. And, got my first date, and, I was an even cooler guy now, I thought. But man, talk about trouble. It was just every chance I could, I was in it. And then I got the bad news that should have been the good news is my mom had fallen in love with her boss. Her boss was widowed, and he was single. And my mom did a very good job over the years of saying, No men, no dating. I don't have time. I've made mistakes. She did a couple times try, and it was ugly. And she's like, no, I'm not dragging my kids through messiness. It's just me and them. Maybe someday later when they're gone. But she really put her all into raising us. As broken a person as she was, that was her goal, was to get us kids raised. And she let us know that we're all moving to Beaverton. She's going to marry Ed. And I was crushed. My empire, my people. What a blessing to be taken out of that at that time, because now I look back at those kids, and my best friend that I was tight with for years, he was never into social media. I lost track of him, and I've been trying and trying and trying. I just learned the other day that he had got drunk and rolled his truck and died. His brother had died before him. His dad was dead. I look at some of the other people that I hung out with in those days. Oh my gosh, ruin everywhere, rot. And so what a blessing to be pulled out of that and then put into Beaverton, where I was a nobody once again. I went to Sunset High School. I wanted to impress my new stepbrothers, who are much older than I. They were all in the trophy cases with their jerseys and everything. They were jocks. Everybody knew my new family. They were football players, and I was going to be the basketball player. But little did I know, being the tallest kid in school isn't what it takes to be a basketball player. Me and my midget friend Brian got cut the first day. It was so degrading, and I lied. I came home. They all asked, well, how did tryouts go? Oh, it was great. Da, 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 da. I was going to Round Table Pizza and playing Donkey Kong for 2 weeks straight, lying to them every evening on how great tryouts went. They were dismal. I couldn't play basketball. So I was a nobody in this school. These kids wear their hair like this and purple and drove BMWs. And even though my parents were now willing to buy me nice clothes and whatever, I didn't even know how to buy. I wore 501s. That's what all my friends back in Gresham wore. Now I got called farmer pants. So I shrunk. It was me and a couple other misfits that just kind of kept to ourselves and, went four-wheeling up in the woods and smoked pot and talked about how we couldn't wait to be done with high school. I did get involved in a church, in a youth group. It was called Sun City. I did make some good Christian friends and whatnot, and I quit doing the most terrible of things. But I became what I've called a fence walker. I had my church friends, then I had my party friends. And I never got full into the drug scene or any of that, and I never got really committed to the Lord. But I walked on the fence. And the Lord says, He wants to spit us out of His mouth if we're like that. He doesn't want us. Be one or the other, but don't be a fake. And I was a fake. I was a fraud. I was a fence walker. And I knew it. But it's what was expected of me at Sunday, and I was expected to be a different person with my party friends. What are you going to do? It's who I am. Well, I met this girl, and we fell in lust, and my senior year, she got pregnant. And now it was for all the world to see. I had to deal with this. I was a fake. We talked about abortion. And we didn't. Praise the Lord, there's some wise people that came beside us and talked us out of it and let us know it was going to be okay. I'll never forget sitting on the trunk of my 68 Cougar, looking over the parking lot at Village Baptist Church with my youth pastor. And he's like, what are you going to do? He did, and I respect that. He wasn't, there's actually two pastors. The other one said, you need to stop going to church. You need to marry her, and you can show back up later, maybe. Glad I didn't take his advice. He got fired after that, shortly after that. But anyway, I had people that were, these Christian friends and leaders were true Christian friends and leaders, and they cared about me, and they were willing to walk with me and help me change. And boy, I'd like to say, boy, that was it. Right there, I changed. No, sometimes some of us, and there's testimonies like they're just radical in their change. But I consider myself more like that ocean freighter that just takes miles to turn. But we're turning, and I'm still turning. But I remember sitting on that trunk lid of that old car with my youth pastor, and it just hit me between the eyes. I'm like, I'm turning out just like my father. My father was told, marry her, do the right thing, get a minimum wage job, and, persevere. And my father was a fake a lot of times, and other relatives. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening again. I could tell what the future was. I had a crystal ball right there. And I decided right there, things were going to change. I didn't know how to do that change. I didn't make all the right decisions. Graduated from high school. We got through the pregnancy. We found adoptive parents. And that gal she's precious. So, it was the right choice. I'm so glad we didn't go do the wrong choice. For us at that time, it was huge. Anyway, she's an adult, and I have a long-distance relationship with her in Seattle. But we got through that, and I started doing my car thing, making money with cars. I had a job at an auto parts store, and then Sears installing some parts. Thought I was going to be a mechanic, and then I started buying and selling some cars and making some real money. But I needed to separate myself because those old friends were still there in the background, my pot-smoking buddies. I had to separate myself from them. And so Village Baptist Church was heavy into sending youth into short-term missions, not unlike YWAM. And I said, sign me up. Don't even care where I go. And wouldn't you know, they sent me to Rwanda, Africa, and this was 1990. You guys remember what was going on in Rwanda, Africa back then? And so it took, months of raising support and getting everything, lined up. And the day I was supposed to get on the plane, they called me. Gunfire everywhere. The Tutsis were attacking. The rebels were attacking. It was the Tutsis that were invading from Uganda. And they said, don't come, we're being attacked. We have no idea what's going to happen. Well, that was a shocker. I had all these plans. And 2 months later, they said, okay, it was a short skirmish. They beat them back down. Everything's cool. Come on over. I get in the plane, and while I'm in the air, it all lights up again. And I land into chaos and spent the next year. It was before the full-on genocide happened, but wow. I had no idea what an education I was going to get with a year in Rwanda, Africa. I saw death at my doorstep. I saw a 10-year-old girl get macheted to death. We buried her in our garden. It was crazy, but these people of faith, wow. They were willing to risk it all. They had their families, their little kids with them, right there in Rwanda, Africa. Chaos going. We're always on the radio back and forth. Okay, this is happening here, and the evacuation plan today is this. It died down a little bit. But I have some amazing Rwanda stories sometime. If we're at game night or something, you want to hear about full-on miracles happening. It was an amazing time. And a lot of growth happened that year. And it did its job. I was separated from my old life. I was able to walk back into the United States and go a different way. And fortunately, that different way landed on Renee's doorstep. I bought a junker little house in Northeast Portland and was out of the Beaverton scene, and she was going to Multnomah School of the Bride, just down the street. And so we were like, hey, you're an East Side person now. I'm an East Side person. We should hunt for churches around here together. And so the next Sunday we did, and pretty much every day after that we were together, just like that. So it was great I wasn't even looking for my spouse. at that time at all. I didn't think I was ready. And, I won't say that I was just head over and heels in love with her. It just fit. We were these friends that we just knew, and it fit. And the Lord provided. And I'd like to say I was this wonderful Christian leader that did everything right. Oh my gosh. I'm surprised my in-laws are here tonight. I'm surprised they let me in the front door. I mean, what kind of story did I tell you guys? I want to move your daughter to the ghetto. I have this $13,000 house I bought that's 500 square feet, and the crack wars were going on in Northeast Portland at that time, and I'm going to illegally dismantle cars in the backyard, and someday I'm gonna own a junkyard. How does that sound? And that's the truth. And she signed up for it too. I mean, she came from this seemingly perfect little neighborhood and family where they kept their grass nice. They didn't dismantle cars in their backyard. They didn't have my background. I don't know how that happened, but it did, and praise the Lord. And Renee's been very patient with me. I was immature, and I had some rough edges back then, and I'd once in a while slip away with some of those friends again and smoke weed and lie to my wife. I would lie to my wife. And she had so much grace, when I'd come up with stories, who I was with or where I was at and all that. And we had kids soon after. And this was a very pivotal point. I remember my little daughter, Carissa. Maybe some of you have met my daughter. But I remember her, just the tiniest little tot. Dad, your breath stinks. Why is your eyes red? And there's a saying, you can, fool a fool, you can con a con, but you can't kid a kid. And I wasn't going to be a father that was lying or trying to con his kids, and I needed to break this cycle that I'd made an oath once and for all. And I hear it all the time, smoking weed, it's herbal, it's not this, it's not that, it's like having a beer or whatever. Yeah, maybe you can justify all that, but I had a relationship with the Lord, and the Lord was telling me as a young man, as a new husband, as a father, this is not my very best for you. I have a perfect plan for you, and this isn't part of it. That's all I don't care who else I could lie or con or talk into what I was doing was right. That was what was here when I really got down on my knees and spoke to the Lord. Nothing was going to change that. So I remember bowing down with Ian. Ian, he was a baby, and now he's 21. And I remember, we'd tuck him in and do prayers. And I said, that's it. Right now, tonight, on my son's life, Lord, I make a vow right now that I'm done with all the remnants of my past life. I'm not ever going to smoke weed again. And fortunately, I had a father. And my father, I'm not going to go into the terrible stories that my father did. He ended up killing his meth dealers, both of them. He got behind on his payments. He was a terrible father, terrible dad. But I don't need to carry that baggage of who he was with me for the rest of my life. I don't care how bad your parents were, or you think they were, or other people that have hurt you. Think of what they gave you. My father gave me life. He gave me my personality. He gave me my confidence. He gave me my height. He told me, he says, son, don't ever do, he showed me the tracks down his arms and his tattoos hiding the tracks. Don't ever do needle drugs. Don't ever do these drugs. I don't remember what drugs he was talking about. Meth was what ended up killing him finally. He says, don't ever do them once, not even once. You know why? You will absolutely love them. What an impact that made on me. He didn't pussyfoot around on it, so praise the Lord for my father, and he made peace with the Lord. I made a mistake in that he was housed right here in Salem, and I chose not to go visit him. I was going to. I wrote him a letter, but, all those years, he could have stopped and visited me. He was going from here to there on his motorcycle, and I'd find out he passed within a couple miles of my house, didn't have time. So I thought, well, he can just sit there for a while, and when I have time, I'm a busy guy. When I have time, I'll come visit him. I never did, and he died in prison. Just, he'd ruined his body, so at age 50-something, he was gone. So hope that speaks to somebody here. If you're holding some baggage against somebody, the Lord can free you from that. But back to where I was, praying with my son, Ian, and I prayed on his life that I would never go that way again. I wasn't going to smoke weed, and I was going to be a godly father. And there's some people here that would probably say I'm not a perfect father, far from it. But fortunately, that was it. All the other trial and errors and oaths and promises failed, but once I on my son's life, and I don't know if I decided to start smoking weed again, I don't know if the Lord would take my son's life, but if anything happened, can you imagine the guilt? So that was what it took for me. But we went on to have 5 children altogether. Moved down here from the Portland area when we decided to expand the business and no longer illegally do things in our backyard, dismantling cars. And a few years ago, we were tired of living next to a wrecking yard and next to our business, so we've moved down here to Silverton, and we're ready for our next adventure, our next stretching. And Renee and I are restless right now. We know that God's got more for us. We don't know what. Alec is just turning 18 now, so we're down to just Joel. And, maybe he can go in the mission field with us. We don't know, but without, all this reading today of locusts and plagues and wars and all this stuff, I'm like, well, maybe you need to do something radical. Maybe an easy chair and a big TV and a bag of Ruffles isn't where you need to be right now. And I've been sick this week, and we, for the first time ever, bought a really nice TV, and somebody gave us a reclining electric chair. So there's some meaning behind that. And it's, as I'm reading about all these things going around on the world, I'm like, maybe this isn't what I know that is not what God's got for me. So you guys might be a part of our decisions and praying with us and as friends, guiding us to our next big adventure. I want to thank you for letting me take time to practice here, and this is good practice, and we all need to do it. And I'd encourage you all. We all should have what we call an elevator testimony. Giving a reason why you love the Lord. 30 seconds in an elevator. Lee gave me some encouragement about a year ago. Somebody came onto my property, and it could have been somebody I had some friction with, but I said, hey, this is not my home. This is not a problem. And so that encouraged me. And we need to have a 3-minute testimony. And that's about most people's attention span is a song on the radio, 3 minutes or so. But there's going to be times when you all have an ability to stand in front of a group for 30 minutes or so. So I'd all encourage you. And then we're a small church now, and this might not be a thing we can do on a regular basis in years to come if there's 300 people here. But it's a good way for us all to get to know each other. And now you guys know me a little better, and I hope to get to know some of you a little better when you come up here.
All right, thank you so much, Don.